The story begins with a daring raid by the Red Clan on a mafia hideout. Under Makoto's command, the Red Clan members are currently gathering to launch a surprise attack on the enemy's lair. They used various strategies and cooperated to infiltrate. One disguised himself as a pizza delivery man to trick the guard into opening the door. As soon as the guard slightly opened it, the others, who had been lurking in the shadows waiting for the chance to ambush, immediately rushed out to cut the chain. Upon receiving the order, Yato instantly jumped down, launching a direct attack through the windows, and within moments had defeated all the smugglers. Their goal was not to seize territory or property, but to track down a specific individual, someone who had purchased weapons from this organization. However, the poor quality photo prevented the boss from identifying who the buyer was. Makoto, with his formidable supernatural power, led Anna, a girl possessing the ability to see through all things in the world, including the darkest hearts, crashing through the wall to storm inside. Anna approached the mafia boss to use her ability to extract information. However, the result was disappointing. The boss knew nothing about the person the Red Clan was searching for. With no reason to continue, the group spared the boss and withdrew. These guys never used the front door, instead smashing holes through people's walls to escape. At that moment, the special task force had already arrived, since the commotion caused by the Red Clan was too great. After all, breaking into someone's house was still a crime. They confronted another formidable rival group called the Blue Clan, also known as the Special Forces, under the command of Blue King Munakata. Tension rose high, but the Red Clan showed no fear. Makoto declared that they would fight these guys to the end without hesitation. Without delay, he leapt down from the high floor, and from within his body burst forth a terrifying pink flame. The Blues used measuring devices to gauge the power unleashed by the third king, Makoto. His strength at this moment had reached nearly 100%, creating an overwhelming pressure that made the very air feel thick and heavy. Everything the flames touched became deformed and dangerously unstable. The flames soared into the sky, forming a gigantic Damocles sword. But the Blues were not easy opponents either. Since he had drawn his sword, they were not afraid to cross blades with him. Their members simultaneously released their powers, generating a counter-force field equal to Makoto's strength. The force fields of both sides continuously clashed, neither yielding. In the sky, two colossal swords appeared, symbols of the authority of the two kings, signaling an intense confrontation. In contrast to the harsh tension of the battle, citizens in the nearby city still lived peacefully, going to school and work as usual. Students of Ashinaka Academy were even transported directly to school by subway. Ashinaka was one of the most modern and prestigious schools in the nation, surrounded by high-tech products and even janitor robots. The main character of the story is a silver-haired boy named Yashiro, known as an ordinary, sociable student with many friends and quite popular among the girls. However, despite appearances, he was not particularly close to anyone, just knowing everyone enough to ask for food here and there. Yet, he had one major flaw: he refused to eat vegetables and only liked meat. Kukuri, his classmate, knowing this, cooked meals full of vegetables to bring to him. But before she could give him the vegetables, Yashiro had already run off somewhere. He also had the habit of sneaking food from the cafeteria, forcing the chef to remain on guard at all times. Kukuri often worried about his excessive eating habits. She tried to chase Yashiro to make him eat her lunchbox full of green vegetables. But in the end, Yashiro still managed to shake her off and ran upstairs, leaving Kukuri to eat both lunchboxes by herself. Her friends were certain that Kukuri must be in love, but Kukuri didn't believe it was one-sided love she felt for Yashiro. She simply didn't want this funny boy, whose movements were always mysterious and unpredictable, to disappear. Now he was enjoying lunch on the school rooftop, and here was his sleek white cat that had followed him all the way to school. Why do people go to school so happily while I go to school like I'm going to prison, bro? At that moment, Yashiro was truly savoring a peaceful moment when suddenly a strange voice echoed in his head. Startling him awake, he even thought for a moment that the cat had spoken. When he came down to class, Yashiro was surprised to find everyone in an uproar. A friend told him the next period had been cancelled to prepare for the upcoming festival. Kukuri also came to inform him that the student council had assigned a task to Yashiro, because he always forgot to bring his PDA, an important mobile device required to enter and leave the island. Kukuri had to write instructions by hand for him and reminded him to find the PDA again if he didn't want to be detained at school. Yashiro's first mission was to go buy fireworks and bring the receipt back to the student council. On the way, Yashiro was unexpectedly spotted by members of Makoto's gang. They recognized that he resembled the person the Red Clan was hunting and quickly reported it. Only a few minutes later, Yada, the Red Clan's skateboarder youth, appeared and swung a baseball bat at Yashiro. Yashiro instinctively dodged, still not understanding what was happening. Yada checked again and confirmed Yashiro was the target, which set the chase in motion. Yashiro weaved through the streets and hid on a pickup truck to shake off Yada, but not long after, two others sped in on motorcycles and attacked, forcing Yashiro to get off and run into a nearby alley. The Red Clan members continued the pursuit relentlessly. In the alley, another Red Clan member was waiting and threw fire at him. But fortunately, a mysterious young man appeared, dispelled the flames, and with a superpower formed an air arm that sent Yada flying into the sky. This mysterious man quietly got Yashiro out of the encirclement. After escaping, Yashiro wanted to thank his savior, but the man pointed a sword at his face. The young man introduced himself as Kuro, retainer of King Ikaijin VII. Kuro's reason for hunting Yashiro was his belief that Yashiro was the incarnation of the Demon King, according to Ikaijin's prophecy, Ikaijin being a king with prophetic abilities. At the same time, a video was broadcast across the city showing a young man proclaiming himself the Demon King, the 7th king, and that person looked exactly like Yashiro. This left Yashiro unable to deny it. Makoto, the Red King, had by now been captured and imprisoned by the Blue Clan, which explained why his group had been acting so fragmented and unplanned. Yashiro tried to explain that the man in the video was not him, but his face, identical to the one on the giant screen, looked utterly convincing, so of course Kuro did not believe him after all. He only followed King Ikaijin's orders, not ordinary law. Realizing he couldn't escape, Yashiro asked Kuro to investigate more thoroughly and said that if not, he accepted death. Hearing this, Kuro let him go. To buy time and get away, Yashiro began fabricating a story about a younger sister with cancer and expressed his desire not to let his sister think her brother was a murderer. With a sorrowful expression, he asked Kuro to let him write one last letter. Although killing did not faze Kuro, hearing Yashiro's pitiful circumstances nonetheless moved him to tears, and he asked more about Yashiro's sister. Yashiro stepped forward to hand Kuro the letter, which in reality was a silly drawing, and asked Kuro to deliver it to his sister. However, the moment Kuro read the letter, he realized he had been tricked. By then it was too late. Yashiro had used a flare hidden in his pocket to blind Kuro and escaped. After Kuro trudged away, Yashiro emerged from inside a turtle plush disguise. A few scratches and even a professional assassin got fooled, but next time he might not be so lucky. After this incident, Makoto's gang issued a manhunt for Yashiro with a bounty of 10 million yen. This information was posted everywhere around the world, and many phone calls came in to report leads. Such a large sum indeed attracted many people, though some considered it a scam. Anna, the girl with the ability to read minds and another superpower that allowed her to use marbles to determine locations, helped them quickly narrow down where Yashiro might be. Kusanagi sent out a mass message to dispatch people for reconnaissance, and he did not forget to warn them about the black dog. He was certain his underlings could not handle that fight. Ever since the news of the 10 million yen bounty broke out, the public immediately buzzed with excitement. That amount was more than a whole year's salary for them, so how could they not be tempted? Though some thought it was just a hoax by the Hamura. Yashiro was still hiding inside his disguise outfit while moving around everywhere, but he wanted to be sure he was not discovered. Just as Yashiro poked his head out of an alley, he saw Kuro searching for him, so he quickly retreated inside to be safe. After that, Kuro ran into Yada, the skateboarder youth with a baseball bat. Yada confronted Kuro about letting Yashiro escape, but suddenly Yashiro appeared on a rooftop waving at the two of them, provoking both to fight each other so he could capture one afterward. Hot-blooded Yada immediately felt insulted. Don't joke with him. He would take down this dark-clad guy and drag Yashiro back to the organization. Yada charged at Kuro, but Kuro was no pushover. He manipulated his invisible hand to claw up the pavement and hurled a billboard and rubble at Yada. Yada was caught in it, but using the force to propel himself upward, he struck at Kuro, who dodged and countered by blasting Yada down to the ground. Kuro then continued chasing Yashiro, but when he reached the rooftop, he found no one there. Yashiro had once again escaped. At this time, Yashiro had returned to his dorm to hide safely. He lay restlessly on his bed, thinking about the identity of the man who looked like him in the video. His life from now on would be filled with trouble. The cat he had brought back suddenly transformed into a naked girl lying next to him. She introduced herself as Nico. Seeing this, Yashiro's face naturally turned bright red. He wasn't a monk, after all. Soon the school day ended, and students not on the list of festival support staff were required to go home immediately. Since Kuro could not find Yashiro, he tracked him to the school by following the emblem Yashiro had dropped, but he could not get inside. He was about to use his power to blow apart the entire school when Kukuri appeared and asked what he was doing. Because Kuro looked suspicious and was acting strangely at the entrance, she curiously asked a few questions. Kuro immediately spoke Yashiro's name. Hearing that familiar name, Kukuri agreed to guide Kuro to Yashiro's dorm. Kuro seriously bowed his head in gratitude to her. There were not many people in this world willing to help others. His master had told him so, and thus he truly cherished those who offered a hand in his times of hardship. At this moment, Yashiro was bewildered by the sudden appearance of a naked girl in his room. He handed her clothes, but she refused to wear them because her nature was still that of a cat. Moreover, Nico had the ability to teleport. Yashiro tried to hand her a shirt, but she vanished onto the wardrobe. Kukuri's voice called from outside, and when Yashiro ran out he saw she had brought Kuro along. Kuro greeted Yashiro politely and casually asked about his younger sister. He then used his power to fly straight into Yashiro's room and drew his sword. Yashiro scrambled to flee. Seeing that Yashiro was about to be killed, Nico stepped forward to block Kuro. Because he was still a virgin, Kuro shyly turned his face away at the sight of such a provocative scene, and at that moment Yashiro and Nico seized the chance to escape. Nico warped space and created an illusion that stretched the corridor into infinity to buy Yashiro more time to run. As soon as she left, the corridor returned to normal, and Yashiro had already climbed out. When Kuro caught up and tried to seize Yashiro with his power, Nico teleported Kuro away and conjured a giant cat illusion to stall him. Of course Kuro was sharp and did not waste much time on the cat, but thanks to it she temporarily saved Yashiro. While fleeing, Yashiro was still kind enough to help a girl pick up her dropped belongings on the street, but the consequence of flirting was that Kuro quickly caught up with him again. Just when it seemed like the end had come, Nico let out a meow and cast an illusion on Kuro. What he saw before him was a dead-end road. One misstep and he would fall, when in reality Kuro was still standing right in front of Yashiro. But in the end both Yashiro and Nico were cornered. Nico conjured a wall to block Kuro, and he wondered how he could be tricked so many times. Kuro charged through the illusory wall only to slam headfirst into a real one, making Nico burst out laughing uncontrollably. Nico always knew how to use illusions to fool Kuro, turning the chase into a game that dragged on through the night. All three grew exhausted, but none of them would stop. Finally, too tired, they ended up back in Yashiro's room. Nico had used so much power that her stomach was growling non-stop, so Yashiro decided to make her something to eat. Kuro was also hungry, so he reluctantly accepted this temporary truce. Little Nico was picky about everything and refused to eat. Meanwhile, Kukuri, while the three weren't around, brought over the bag Kuro had left behind. Kuro was deeply grateful for her kindness and retrieved his forgotten bag. Inside Kuro's bag were his cooking utensils, and he ended up cooking a lavish meal in place of Yashiro. After the food was ready, the three of them sat down to eat together, deciding to deal with unresolved matters later. Meanwhile, in the detention facility, Blue King Munakata, leader of the Blue Clan, came to meet Makoto with a less-than-friendly attitude. Makoto was sleeping, and Munakata grabbed his head and slammed it against the wall to wake him for questioning. During their previous battle, the situation had been extremely tense. Munakata advanced and announced that Makoto had been captured, yet Makoto didn't resist at all and even willingly held out his hands to be cuffed. Munakata wanted to know why Makoto suddenly surrendered unconditionally and allowed himself to be arrested. Munakata was worried about Makoto using his power to the extreme limit. Right now the intensity of his aura had reached its peak, and if his sword of Damocles in the sky lost control and fell, it could cause a catastrophic disaster like Kagutsu, taking the lives of thousands of innocent people. Makoto explained that he let himself be captured so that Munakata could keep watch over him. If he showed signs of losing control, Munakata would be the one to stop him. Hearing such sentimental nonsense made Munakata feel sick, and besides, he couldn't spend 24 hours a day watching Makoto since he was busy and couldn't always be sparring with him. After that, Munakata met with his subordinate Seri to discuss options. They considered using heat-resistant materials to restrain Makoto. Seri felt this was a chance to kill Makoto as much as possible for research purposes and suggested methods such as injecting heavy doses of tranquilizers or muscle relaxants. Munakata was very surprised by this bold plan and said he would think further. They also continued investigating the case of the man who resembled Yashiro and discovered the murder weapon was a type of gun frequently traded by the mafia. The ringleader behind this supply chain had disappeared along with a truck carrying explosives and enough weapons to open a store. The police had gotten involved seriously, so Seri wanted to cooperate with them to gather intelligence. Munakata wanted to know everything that had happened in the city over the past 2 weeks. He had to see and hear things himself to believe they were accurate. The Blue Clan also tried to suppress the videos Makoto's men had posted online, turning them into worthless junk clips, and they checked the culprit's face against criminal records, but to no avail, only hoping the Green Clan hadn't gotten wind of this. While factions were clashing over Yashiro's case, he and his two companions were still sitting together eating and chatting. On the Red Clan's side, they knew the Blue Clan had gotten involved, so they spread the videos even further to hunt the culprit at all costs. Internal conflict also erupted within the Red Clan. Rikio, one of its members, and Yada quarreled and even fought. A fight was one thing, but somehow they ended up brawling in Kusanagi's bar, enraging him when his imported British furniture was damaged. He immediately grabbed both of them and gave them a beating, demanding to know why they had insisted on fighting. Rikio believed Makoto had been captured far too easily, and even hinted at wanting to work for the Blue King. Yada, of course, couldn't stand someone speaking ill of his big boss. Kusanagi immediately burst out laughing. The two apologized to the bar owner, and he told them a story. Upon hearing this, the two young men instantly became meek as puppies and bowed in apology. Kusanagi explained to them that Mikoto had accepted being captured so that Monokata would have to constantly watch over him. The Blue Clan was effectively holding a ticking time bomb, but that situation also gave the Red Clan freedom to operate outside without being tightly controlled. Hearing this, the two cheered up and left happily. After they left, Anna immediately exposed Kusanagi's lie. Taking advantage of the quiet moment, Yashiro asked Kuro about the fire-obsessed men who had been chasing him. Kuro explained they were comrades of those who had been killed and now sought revenge. They were like retainers of a king, all gathered into an order. Red King Mikoto was the king of the Third Order, and among all the kings he was the most brutal. Yashiro finally began to understand vaguely. Perhaps he had been mistaken by this violent group for the murderer. Kuro was certain there was no mistake. That guy is definitely you. I'll let you enjoy your last meal as a condemned man and then deal with you. Meanwhile, at the port, the Red Clan members had found the weapons hidden in shipping crates following Kusanagi's directions. This was the location where the transaction boss had gone missing. He was not the only one to disappear. Just then, Fushimi of the Blue Clan appeared. He had also betrayed the Red Clan. So when they met, their eyes reddened. After taking care of the two Red Clan members, Fushimi immediately reported back to the Blue Clan to call Seri. Kuro continued to tell Yashiro about the system of kings. He explained there were 7 kings in total, each ruling a color and possessing extraordinary abilities and powers. This world was run by the power of the kings themselves, and no government could stand against them. Even the largest prime minister must obey like a tail-wagging dog. Without the power of a king, Japan could be reduced from a great power to a small vassal state oppressed by other countries. The Gold King currently had great influence in economics and technology. His company produced these phones. The Gold King symbolized the color yellow. Mikoto's order was the Red King, symbolized by red and described as brutal and bloodthirsty. They frequently provoked fights everywhere and feared no one. Yata, a member of the Red Clan, was currently provoking the Mafia men. Those hounds kept pestering them, and getting lectured by a brat enraged them. The Mafia men immediately drew guns and opened fire, but how could bullets hit these supernatural youths? Yata easily dodged, snatched a gun from them, heated it with his power, and seared the foreheads of the Mafia men. Kuro also explained why he was hunting Yashiro. According to King Ikaijin the 7th, the predecessor king with prophetic abilities, Yashiro might be the successor to the 7th king. But Ikaijin feared that a successor like Yashiro, inheriting the Demon King, would be corrupted and bring great disaster. So he ordered that Yashiro be eliminated to avoid future catastrophe. After saying this seriously, Kuro demanded to kill Yashiro on the spot. However, Yashiro refused and demanded concrete evidence that he was the successor Demon King. Kuro then produced the video that Mikoto's side had released, but Yashiro countered, asking that if it were true and he had such power, why would he be running from Mikoto's people? This made Kuro reconsider. He also asked Yashiro who Nico was, and Yashiro said he didn't know her. Kuro realized Nico was a stream, meaning someone with innate superpowers not granted by any king. Yashiro promised Kuro he would prove his innocence. Hearing this, Kuro decided to spare him for the time being, but warned that if any seed of crime were found, he would not hesitate to act. The next morning, Kuro, like a diligent mother caring for 2 children, woke up early and prepared lunch for all 3. This was the first time Yashiro had ever seen such a beautiful, sparkling bento box. Taking advantage of the moment, Nico grabbed a piece but was smacked for it. Yashiro was suddenly troubled by a cleaning robot, so Nico stepped in to smash it so it would release him. Kuro felt somewhat irritated because Yashiro seemed to focus only on his own personal life without putting in any effort to prove his innocence. Kuro was determined not to take his eyes off Yashiro for even a single moment. During class, the teacher questioned who Kuro was, and Yashiro lied, saying he was a transfer student. Nico then suddenly appeared in the middle of class, intending to doodle on Kuro's face, but was caught instead really daring lately. The teacher again asked about this unfamiliar student, and once more Yashiro said he was a transfer student. So now the class had 2 transfer students in one day. At lunch, Kukuri was surprised when Yashiro brought his own lunch, making her effort of preparing an extra box for him wasted. Yashiro seized the chance to flatter Kuro, calling it a love bento, which embarrassed Kuro so much that he drew his sword, ready to strike the shameless brat. Meanwhile, Nico had finished her own bento and decided to beg Kukuri for some, but immediately regretted it as it was filled with vegetables. Yashiro then continued searching for information, examining the blurry photo of the person who looked like him, but he could not confirm the identity. Earlier that morning, a classmate had also found the video and advised Yashiro to turn back before it was too late. Yashiro had to feign cluelessness to ask for the clip. At that time, the Blue Clan had discovered information about the criminal the Red Clan was searching for, and they had traced him to the school Yashiro attended. Yashiro then thought of a way to prove his innocence. He only needed evidence that when the culprit appeared in the video around midnight, he had not been at the scene. Kuro was doubtful, since no one could prove Yashiro had stayed in school the entire night. However, Yashiro remembered that many things had happened that night, especially involving Nico. She had always been by his side, so she was sure he was a good person. But Kuro rejected the idea of letting such a clumsy, foolish girl testify, insisting she would be considered an accomplice. Yashiro recalled he had stayed late that night to prepare for the school festival, so he was confident he could find someone who had seen him. After some fumbling around, the three finally managed to finish preparing costumes for the play, leaving Kyukuri anxious. Meanwhile, Makoto's group had also located the school. Yada immediately rushed off alone without waiting for any plan. That fateful night indeed had many events. Kyukuri had been confessed to by another male student on the tower in a grand spectacle in front of many people. She had rejected him without hesitation, leaving the boy in tears after his first heartbreak. Kyukuri had tried to forget about it, but was reminded again by Yashiro, which annoyed her. But Yashiro's real purpose was simply to ask whether she had seen him hanging around there at that time. Unfortunately, Kyukuri wasn't sure, as Yashiro kept appearing and disappearing. After the confession, the student council had intervened to resolve the matter. Yashiro thought perhaps the student council had seen his face, so he went to ask the president. But she couldn't remember because she didn't care about such a trivial incident. Who in the world, being so busy with heaven and earth, would pay attention to a nobody like Yashiro? She implied. However, the incident had been reported in the news because a large fire had broken out that night. Many photos had been taken by the photography club, but Yashiro searched endlessly without finding a single picture of himself, not even by accident. This made Kuro increasingly irritated with Yashiro, warning that if he could not find proof soon, he would definitely take action. Later, Kyukuri asked Kuro to help her carry some things to the faculty office. Hearing that, Yashiro remembered another chance. He asked the teacher to see the list of students who had gone out that day, and his name was not on it. This proved he had never left the school that night and therefore could not have been the culprit. The relief he felt was overwhelming. Anyone wanting to enter the island had to pass through the automatic gate system, so if Yashiro's name wasn't on the list, it meant he was still on the island. After that, Nico demanded food since it was mealtime, and Yashiro went to buy from the vending machine. But Kyukuri had to buy it instead because Yashiro had once again forgotten his school-issued payment phone. Kuro asked Kyukuri whether it was possible to leave the island without the phone, and Kyukuri revealed that Yashiro didn't need the main gate at all, he had his own escape route. Kuro was about to draw his sword to strike, but Yashiro begged for another chance. Kuro thought he was trying to turn himself into a joke, but Nico stepped in to shield Yashiro. Seeing them protect each other softened Kuro, reminding him of his own former master, who had also protected him that way. He couldn't bring himself to attack. Yashiro was indeed telling the truth that many things had happened that night. Suddenly, Kyukuri recalled meeting Yashiro in the gymnasium at exactly 12:30 am that night. Together they had discovered the giant hole in the ceiling, and she had even secretly taken a picture of him and set it as her wallpaper. From this, Kuro concluded Yashiro was innocent. There was no way he could travel from the crime scene back to school in under an hour. Yashiro and Nico rejoiced, dancing together, while the three returned to focus on schoolwork. The entire class was amazed at how much faster progress became under Kuro's direction. However, when Yashiro went home to relax, he discovered a blood-stained shirt in his closet. Memories of that night suddenly flooded back, making him wonder if he might actually be the culprit without even knowing it. Nico returned unexpectedly, and though Yashiro tried to stay calm, he was terrified inside. Nico also sensed his unease but deliberately said nothing. Meanwhile, two Red Clan members, Yada and Rikyo, came to the school but were blocked at the gate since they needed a PDA to enter. The next day, the school festival was underway, and Kuro took charge as leader, organizing everyone for the event. Seeing Kyukuri's sleeve torn, Kuro kindly offered to sew it back, while Yashiro sat in a daze, unable to believe that even after proving his innocence, he might still be the true culprit. Why, then, was there a bloody shirt in his closet? Still, Yashiro set the thought aside, trying to act normal around his friends. The Blue Clan had also arranged to visit the school to confirm Yashiro's identity. Seri demanded that Fushimi go along to verify, and though reluctant, he obeyed orders. Yada and Rikyo had mugged two students for their phones and used them to sneak in. Once inside, they went around asking about Yashiro, but no one knew him. No one could have guessed that Yashiro and the other two had already slipped out through the secret passage to buy more fireworks to replace those lost during the night they were chased. At that moment, the Blue Clan delegation also arrived and negotiated with the principal, promising not to cause trouble as long as the school provided information on Yashiro. If not, Seri would escalate the matter legally. The principal was hesitant since the Blues were searching for a student without even knowing his name, only his vague appearance making it extremely difficult. Suddenly, Fushimi went outside. Meanwhile, the two Red Clan members were still prowling around looking for Yashiro without success. At one point, Fushimi and the two nearly crossed paths, separated only by a fountain. Fushimi then went to the student council, drugged one member, and used their authority to compare student records with the culprit from the video. While waiting for the results, Fushimi noticed Yada and Rikyo intimidating two girls. Yada refused to let Rikyo raise his voice at girls, threatening to beat him if he did after all. Yada had only been questioning boys the entire time. Rikyo grew suspicious of Yada's strange behavior. Just then, Fushimi appeared and mocked Yada's old soft spot for girls, a weakness he had never shaken. Yada was infuriated by the traitor, declaring he wasn't even worthy of saying his name. Fushimi shrugged it off, saying he was simply different from them, so leaving had been natural. He was only curious how the two had managed to sneak in when security here was so strict. Fushimi still kept provoking Yada, calling him by the hated name Misaki, which only fueled his rage. Rikyo tried to restrain Yada, reminding him that any mistake now would render all of Mikoto's efforts meaningless. Yada was calming down a bit, but Fushimi continued to insult Mikoto, pushing Yada over the edge. Unable to endure it any longer, Yada charged into battle, flames igniting around him as he spun like a tornado and struck. Fushimi blocked with precise sword techniques, and the two clashed furiously, exchanging blow after blow without either gaining the upper hand. Yada mocked that Fushimi had grown weaker, but in truth Fushimi had only grown stronger, wielding both the power of red and blue fire against steel. The fight escalated until Fushimi threw 3 daggers, knocking Yada off balance and cutting him off from his flames. Rikyo tried to intervene, but 2 more blades flew, forcing him back. Yada gathered all his strength, the fire around his body blazing fiercely, when suddenly Seri, vice commander of the Blues and Munakata's right hand, arrived to stop the battle. She reminded them that their purpose here was not to fight. Recognizing Yada as the Blood King's vanguard commander, nicknamed the Death Skater, Seri introduced herself in turn as the infamous Heartless Witch. Seri requested they withdraw peacefully, but Yada was too enraged to listen until she revealed that Mikoto was alive and well, his biggest daily concern merely whether the food was good or bad. Yada relented, suppressing his fury and leaving the scene. Fushimi, however, was reprimanded for provoking conflict and infiltrating school records. Even so, Seri demanded to know what information he had uncovered. Before leaving, Yada decided to question one more person, this time determined to ask a girl so he wouldn't be mocked again. The one he approached was Kukuri, but she told him she didn't know the person in the photo at all. Fushimi, unable to locate Yashiro in the school's internal system, began to suspect the culprit was only disguising himself as a student. Meanwhile, Mikoto had been plagued by strange dreams. In them, he destroyed places in a blaze of fire so intense it threatened to consume even himself. He even dreamt of the face of the one who had killed his comrade. At that time, Yashiro's group had stopped at a diner because Nico cried out that she was starving. But Yashiro remained distracted, trapped in the thought that he might truly be the culprit. Out of countless people, only one person had a photo of him. Kuro still hadn't fully cleared him as a suspect if Yashiro wasn't the killer. Then he had to discover who had framed him. As Yashiro looked around the diner, he noticed the walls covered in photos of regular customers. Even Kukuri's group had their picture up there, yet his own face was absent. The owner recognized him as a regular, but was equally surprised that no photo of him existed. At the same time, Seri visited Kusanagi. This time, she wasn't dressed in her usual stiff uniform, but styled herself as a refined lady. She was annoyed that Kusanagi had revealed her nickname, Heartless Witch, to that brat. But she hadn't come just to drink. Seri expressed concern about Mikoto's growing power if he lost control again. The map of Japan itself might need to be redrawn. Kusanagi replied that this was exactly why Mikoto had sought Monokata's clan. He simply wanted one night of peaceful sleep without worrying about the danger he posed. Kusanagi then shared about a friend he and Mikoto had once deeply respected, now lost to them. 8 years ago, that person had been devoted to Mikoto, wanting only to become his retainer when Mikoto became king. Once, he had been beaten in the streets and hospitalized. Such was the price of being close to someone as powerful as Mikoto. Mikoto had stormed off in fury to confront the attacker, but the boy had instead asked him to scratch his leg. Strangely enough, the violent Mikoto actually agreed, though he still punched the bandaged youth once afterward. During all this, Yashiro was still wrestling with his identity, his memories hazy and incomplete. Kuro suggested calling Kukuri to confirm, but Nico acted suspiciously, refusing to let him call, insisting they return and ask her directly. When asked why, she only replied that she didn't like it, then transformed into a cat and left. When Yashiro called Kukuri, she suddenly claimed not to know who he was and that she had never met anyone with that name. Her tone was not joking, which immediately caused doubts between them. Kuro grew more suspicious and wanted to return to the school to verify. Yashiro tried calling his home, but the operator reported that the number he dialed did not exist. He wondered if he had dialed incorrectly, or if he himself was lying. Kiro thought there was something wrong with his head. Flashing back to 3 years earlier, Makoto at that time was an unmatched king whose power was absolute. In the organization was a man named Totsuka, the very same Totsuka who had been killed. Within the Red Clan, Totsuka had been cheerful, lively, and kind, much like Yashiro now. He wasn't a fighter, yet everyone loved him like family. Though frail, he earnestly longed to become Makoto's subordinate, believing Makoto's strength was not for destruction, but to protect others. Makoto remembered how Totsuka constantly invited him out for Thai soup. After a few years, Makoto had ascended to king, and up until 3 months ago, everything had still been lively and ordinary. Totsuka had many hobbies, and he had even just bought a new camera. He often played guitar and sang for everyone. Yet Totsuka had been murdered right before their eyes only a week ago, leaving Yada in unbearable grief. Kusanagi had delivered Totsuka's camera back to Makoto. At that same time, Yashiro and Kiro returned to the place Yashiro once called home only to find it was just a sports field. Yashiro began doubting whether he was truly Yashiro at all, or if Yashiro had never even existed. The harder he tried to recall, the emptier his memory became. Despairing, he asked Kiro to end his life, for his existence seemed meaningless if no one in the world remembered him. Kiro prepared to strike, but then the words of his late master Ikaijin resurfaced, guiding him. Kiro decided that Yashiro had to fight to uncover his true identity. They had to unmask the secrets behind everything before making any decisions. Kiro would not allow himself to choose blindly when so much remained unknown. Yashiro was deeply moved by his words. Just then, the floodlights on the field switched on, and the Blue Clan surrounded them, ordering their capture. Kiro refused, so Seri commanded her men to draw their blades. Hiding nearby, Nico suddenly appeared and cast an illusion, transforming the field into a bustling city to help them escape. The Blues fell into confusion, but Seri quickly realized it was all an illusion. As Nico was about to lead the two out, Seri intercepted them. Kiro stepped forward to fight, declaring he would not even draw his sword. That blade was not meant to slay people like Seri. Even without unsheathing his weapon, he was able to fight evenly against her, forcing her into a tight situation. Fushimi immediately reported the clash to Munakata. At that moment, the Damocles sword appeared in the sky, shattering the illusion. From a distance, Munakata approached slowly, summoning his own sword while gradually unraveling the barrier. With a single stomp, he dispelled Nico's power, forcing her back into her normal form. Munakata explained her ability, recognizing her as a mysterious strain whose illusions posed an extreme danger. Kiro resolved to stay behind and buy them time. Nico agreed, dragging Yashiro away. Bound by his own code, Kiro refused to draw his sword. Munakata pressed him, trying to force him into an all-out duel. He didn't even bother drawing his own blade, instead attacking with a sheathed sword. Without a weapon, Kiro stood no chance against the king and was defeated quickly, left powerless. While fleeing, Yashiro suddenly stopped and looked back for some reason. Munakata had pinned Kiro underfoot, ridiculing him about his former master. He scorned Kiro's late master as a failure unworthy of being a king, claiming his existence had only destabilized the balance of power among the kings, a perpetual blemish in Munakata's eyes. And now Kiro willingly chose to become a pawn for Yashiro, believing he would be the new king. Munakata suspected that Yashiro might be a schemer, aware that Kiro would stay at his side until the moment of judgment, and thus Yashiro could simply use Nico to deceive Kiro, keeping him close as a protector. Perhaps they were all just pieces on Yashiro's chessboard. Even Kiro himself knew this, yet he continued. Kiro had been with Yashiro long enough to understand his nature. Suddenly, Yashiro turned back, unwilling to abandon his friends. At that moment, he apologized to Kiro for lying. He summoned the king's sword and released a strike. Yashiro's sword glowed white, his power equal to Munakata's. Munakata raised his hand to block, but could not. Yet it was all a feint, meant to give Kiro an opening to break through and escape. Soon he smashed the Blue Clan's defenses and fled outside. Seri ordered Fushimi to call the police. The three hid in an alley, though Kiro's condition looked poor. Yashiro revealed that the fight earlier had only been an illusion Nico created. Kiro explained that Nico's ability was not just to create illusions, but also to manipulate memory, inserting familiarity into the minds of others from their very first meeting. Yashiro's acceptance at school had been Nico's doing. She had altered his classmates' memories, and even his own. Now Yashiro begged her to restore his true memories so he could know whether he was truly the one Kiro was searching for. Kiro urged him to think carefully, but Yashiro was ready to take responsibility for everything he had done. Returning to the night in question, Nico had been in the equipment room when Yashiro fell straight from the sky into the school gym. She found him, and upon seeing his smile, she felt secure. Nico had claimed Yashiro, giving him a false memory and a name. When Kyukuri rushed in at the sound, she saw Yashiro, but had no idea who he was. Nico had used her power to implant Yashiro into the memories of his classmates and even into his own recollections. But that was all Nico showed him. Naturally, Yashiro wanted to see more. Nico wanted him to promise that if he saw the truth, he would not leave her. Yashiro promised, and she revealed that before that moment he had been kicked out of an airship and fell straight into the gym. Yashiro wanted to know who that person was. As he looked to the sky, the airship appeared again. The next morning the three of them stood in an open field, breathing in fresh air. Yashiro said that though so much had been false, the time he had spent with everyone had been real, and he treasured it. Together with his two friends, he returned to the bridge leading to the school one last time to say farewell, for it had once been a place he called home. He vowed to carry the memories of this place in his heart. Though his past was still unclear, he swore to uncover it as soon as possible. Kuro urged them to leave before the Blue Clan discovered their location. The three decided then to live freely, joyfully, and without restraint. Monokata's clan had already made capturing Yashiro their top priority. The difficulty was that Yashiro had two suspicious companions, and no one could have imagined they would escape even Monokata's grasp. They had even slipped past Fushimi, the greatest pursuer, leaving no trace on any surveillance maps. Monokata was certain they were not the type to back down easily. Suddenly Fushimi knocked to report that a search team had been attacked, their PDA stolen, and the victim identified the attacker as Kuro. Monokata understood this was a message and ordered Fushimi to check. Indeed, a slip of paper with a number 14 was found. Fushimi, Seri, and Monokata sat waiting in silence. At the appointed time Yashiro called. He had hidden his location so they could not trace him. Yashiro demanded that Monokata tell him who was on the airship, for that man was the true culprit behind Tatsuka's murder. Yashiro wanted to negotiate with Monokata that if he captured the person on the airship, then Yashiro would show himself. Monokata didn't want to agree because no one could be certain that the other two wouldn't come to rescue Yashiro. Monokata deliberately stalled, speaking in circles to give Fushimi's team more time to track them down. Just when Yashiro thought the negotiation had failed, a moment later Monokata changed his mind, since Fushimi had already traced Yashiro's location, and Monokata kept buying time for his men to move in. Monokata suddenly agreed to capture the Silver King, Adolf, who was also the first king, in exchange for Yashiro's group of three showing themselves whenever they wished, as long as all three appeared together. However, contrary to Monokata's words, Fushimi had already brought men close to the truck where Yashiro's group was hiding. His subordinates were hesitant, afraid they couldn't win against Yashiro's people. Furious, Fushimi snapped, questioning why he even had to drag this useless bunch with him, then revealed to them that Yashiro didn't even have any real power, so they had nothing to fear. They stormed the truck, but upon opening it, Yashiro's group was nowhere to be found. Only a phone and a portable charger remained. Yashiro had left these behind to mislead Scepter 4 and buy time for them to escape. At that time, the three of them had already slipped down to a ferry on the river, and it was Kuro who had detected the danger and saved them. Thankfully, he had a strong sense of Monokata's cunning nature and had stayed on guard. The three decided to move on to their next destination. Having failed to capture Yashiro, Monokata decided to honor the deal and turned his focus to apprehending the Silver King. A state of emergency was declared, mobilizing an unusually large force, something rarely seen. They had already sent 3 messages to the Silver King but received no response. Monokata only required that procedure was observed. Seri suggested they should first ask the Gold King for permission, but Monokata knew he would never approve, so he insisted on capturing first and reporting later, willing to take full responsibility himself. When asked why he would go so far, Monokata made it clear it wasn't because of his deal with Yashiro, but because he had already suspected the Silver King was involved in several recent incidents and displaying suspicious behavior. The airship's route had long been fixed, yet lately it had changed erratically, a clear sign of something unusual. At first Monokata thought it was simply rerouting, but since he had contacts in the Aerial Control Bureau, he asked them to check. Airships only ever change course if there's an incident aboard. So what was causing this one to change course so frequently? Moreover, the previous night it had been seen hovering near the stadium where they had fought, and one of its routes also passed the site of Tatsuka's murder. Monokata then ordered his entire squad to proceed with the arrest of the Silver King, on the charge of involvement in the death of Tatsuka, member of Mikoto's clan. Meanwhile, Nico was spying on the movements of Scepter 4. Soon, helicopters lifted off in full deployment. One unit would approach the airship and their captain would issue a warning. If there was no reply within minutes or the capture failed, they would open fire without restraint. The Silver King, seeing visitors arriving, was already prepared to welcome them. He immediately grabbed the girl in his arms and danced a few steps with her as a mocking greeting, then tossed her aside, leaving her sprawled on the floor. Yashiro and Kuro, by then, had already hijacked one of Scepter 4's helicopters. Kuro asked Yashiro about the identity of this first king. Even Kuro had never met him, only heard of him from Ikaigen. Among the 7 kings, he was a special one like the Gold King. This man was called the Silver King and was shrouded in mystery. Because of him, even the Gold King, ruler of finance, was ranked only 2nd. The Silver King reigned over the skies and was considered the leader of kings, while the Gold King ruled the land. At that moment, Nico mischievously flashed the searchlight everywhere, earning scolding from Fushimi. Kuro feared that once they closed in on the airship, it would be difficult to separate from the others. Nico, being too impatient, shoved the controls forward, sending their helicopter charging straight toward the Silver King's vessel. Just before collision, the Silver King detonated his entire airship, and Yashiro's helicopter smashed into it, creating a massive explosion. No one knew that the Silver King had already escaped safely to another location. A decade ago, the Silver King was still serving in the military, conducting experiments to uncover the nature of the powers possessed by the current kings. In one such experiment, they created a miniature maze and placed a lab rat inside it. As the Silver King infused it with power, the rat summoned a sword and darted through the maze. It used that power to easily escape, and astonishingly, it became a leader that the other rats followed out. The influence of the empowered rat spread to the others, just as it could to humans. The reason was that this power functioned like a magnetic field surrounding their bodies, and the result was the formation of a squad of super soldiers. Even the Gold King was stunned by the experiment. However, the power was too great, and the maze exploded. The Silver King had a sister whom he dearly loved, and both of them were sponsored by the military for these experiments. The Silver King never liked the Gold King much, since the latter only ever thought about war, but his sister forced him to shut his mouth, because when it came to finances, such things were inevitable. The Gold King also seemed to harbor feelings for his sister. But later, the Silver King lost her in a war caused by the very power he once cherished. He came to see it as a terrible mistake. When the war ended, he abandoned everything, took to his airship, and has been running ever since, severing even his former ties with the Gold King. In the present, after the airship's fall, many people still believed it to be the vessel of some cult or sacred force, but the truth was that it was nothing remarkable. Before long, the rabbits of Scepter 4 sealed off the crash site, yet no bodies were found in the cockpit of the downed helicopter. Instead, the 2 who should have been inside were discovered unconscious nearby. At the school where Yashiro had once stayed, even though their memories had been altered, some classmates still felt something missing, as if there had been someone who always helped with important things, but they could not recall who. Kyukuri no longer had feelings for Yashiro, but for Miss Hina, the boy who had confessed to her atop the tower. Preparations for the festival were still unfinished, and the students discussed using an empty dorm room for storage. Kyukuri, staring at the vending machine on the ground floor, felt a vague sense of familiarity. When Yashiro's former close friends visited his room, they all felt that someone deeply familiar had once lived there, but no one could name him. They spoke of that boy, yet could not remember who he was. Around this time, Munakata sought out the Gold King, ruler of finance, to speak. The Gold King was standing before the coffin where the Silver King lay in slumber. Their greeting was brief, almost cordial. The Gold King then pulled Munakata into a cosmic plane, summoning his sword and conjuring planets to attack him. He demanded to know Munakata's purpose. Munakata explained he came only to talk, so their clash paused. He wanted to take the body presumed to be the Silver King for examination, as it was the Gold King who had found it at the crash site. The Silver King had lived immortally for half a lifetime without ever dying, so his sudden death was suspicious. Seeing the Gold King's oppressive aura radiating in all directions, Munakata understood and withdrew. For now, he could not oppose him, for the country still needed the Gold King. Meanwhile, Mikoto was in his cell when a phone suddenly appeared and began ringing non-stop. On the line was someone claiming to have killed Tatsuka, a masked fox. This figure was in Yashiro's old dorm room. He taunted and lunged at Mikoto, even attempting to harass Anna. At the mention of Anna, Mikoto's eyes snapped open. Seizing the moment, the fox spirit hurled itself into Mikoto's body, trying to seize his energy. But what it never expected was Mikoto turning the energy back on him, unleashing a colossal force that terrified the fox, forcing him to flee in fear. Mikoto's power chased the masked fox back into Yashiro's old room, where it erupted into a massive explosion. Afterward, Mikoto shattered his restraints and broke out of prison. Anna, sensing him, knew at once that Mikoto was returning. His body blazed like a living flame, and he incinerated the prison, causing another colossal blast. Scepter 4 tried every means to stop him, but nothing worked. Seri mobilized the entire unit to block his path, throwing techniques at him, but Mikoto's overwhelming fire burned through them. Her squad was crushed under his might, only spared worse damage when Fushimi swiftly drove his knives into the ground, diffusing the impact of the flames. Trembling, Fushimi reached for his sword, but his strength was already spent. Anyone who tried to stand in Mikoto's way was blown aside and defeated by his power. calmly, relentlessly. Mikoto walked on because once he decided to move, no one could stop him. Outside, the entire Red Clan was already waiting. They knew this move meant Mikoto had found the one responsible for killing his comrade. Fushimi, meanwhile, held back Scepter 4 from chasing. With his crew at his side, Mikoto marched toward the school to confront the caller. Inside the school, Kukuri glanced outside and saw Mikoto's sword of flame suspended in the air. A thunderous blast shook the campus as Mikoto smashed through the security gate. Students panicked, screaming as the Red Clan stormed in. Mikoto hurled a fireball that sliced the clock tower in two, freezing everyone in place. Kusanagi, holding a megaphone, assured the students that they sought only the boy from the video, that no one else would be harmed, and asked for cooperation. The gang split up to search. Mikoto gave his orders, then headed off alone. Hamura members swore not to hurt the innocents, but their thuggish demeanor marching around with bats and pipes hardly inspired trust. Their arrogance left the students too afraid to resist, but also unwilling to help. Kusanagi told his men to improvise if anyone fought back, but absolutely to avoid harming innocents, no violence permitted. Scepter 4 forces arrived, so Kusanagi redeployed his people, tightening control of the gates. Anna worked constantly, searching for the intruder's location, but still could not find him. Fushimi's squad was stopped outside. Then, mysteriously, the sound of a cat's meow Nico's voice echoed. Meanwhile, Sari bowed her head, apologizing to Munakata for letting Mikoto escape. But Munakata did not blame her. After all, Mikoto was the third king. Munakata already suspected Mikoto's purpose in coming. If the true culprit was another king, things would be complicated. The colorless king, the seventh king, was a bizarre existence, each generation possessing extraordinary, unpredictable power. The seventh king was like a joker in a deck of cards, uncontrollable. Munakata made no move to interfere because he knew the new colorless king, Yashiro, would inevitably face Mikoto. Since both were dangerous, volatile forces, it would be best to let them destroy each other, leaving Munakata to profit as the third party. Suddenly snow began to fall from the night sky. In that moment, Anna climbed up a rocky cliff to reach Mikoto, but slipped. He caught her, pulling her to his side, letting her rest beside him. To her eyes, people could only be recognized by color, and Mikoto's color was the most beautiful of all. She had not yet found the hiding enemy, but believed that sooner or later, the mouse would fall into the trap, so there was no need to despair. At the school, Hamura had now completely taken control. Anyone who tried to escape was captured and forced back inside. Kusanagi warned Yada not to be so hot-headed. He knew Yada wanted to kill Fushimi, but told him to endure for now. Fushimi had once spoken of leaving to Yada. He said he was quitting because Hamura's actions were childish, and he had grown sick of their prideful symbol. This drove Yada into a frenzy, especially when Fushimi burned his Hamura tattoo with his own flames right in front of him. Fushimi mocked them for having special powers yet acting like bratty kids. Even now, whenever Yada remembered, the scar where that tattoo had been itched with rage. But without orders, he still could not move. Kusanagi then went to find Mikoto to confide about Tatsuka in the past, and he realized that from the very beginning only Tatsuka had seen something different in Mikoto and trusted him, while everyone else considered him a ticking time bomb. Kusanagi also never thought that being with Mikoto and everyone would bring this much joy. Suddenly Kusanagi called Anna to go with him so Mikoto could deal with his own matter, as he had a guest waiting not far away, and that person was none other than Munakata. The two had a conversation, and Munakata wanted Mikoto to withdraw his forces and leave Yashiro for him to handle. However, Mikoto still refused. Whatever agreement Munakata offered, he declined. Munakata believed that if Mikoto unleashed his power once more, a catastrophe would occur and thousands of innocent people would die. But Mikoto simply wanted to mind his own business and be left alone as it had always been. Munakata, still regarding him as a friend, asked once again if Mikoto was truly certain. Mikoto was completely resolute in his decision. Yashiro's group, at that moment, had just returned to their temporary hideout only to find it had been vandalized and burned down, with an unknown person having carved a hole through the floor. They had already heard the news about the school, and they knew infiltrating it would be nearly impossible since both the Blue Clan and Red Clan had locked down everything. At worst, the entire island could become a battlefield. They did not yet know what to do, so Yashiro thought of listening to the words that Ikaijin, Kuro's master, had left behind. However, Kuro believed that what they should do was already clear. They would go together to rescue Kukuri and the others, but to do that they first needed to find out where she and the others were being held. Nico did not want to go, but she reluctantly followed after Yashiro persuaded her. The next morning, Yada called Kusanagi to request reinforcements. Mikoto was still brooding over what Munakata had said the night before. He was unsure what orders he should give, but suddenly he stood up and left the room, surprising everyone. On Munakata's side, even the Blue Clan did not know what to do. Suddenly, black smoke was detected inside the school, and Munakata had no choice but to order his forces to prepare for action immediately. The students huddled together in fear inside the academy. Yada's unit had been ordered to wait right at the gate. Before they moved in, Seri commanded them to surrender and lay down their weapons, but Yada's unit of course did not listen. Seri instantly gave the order for her army to charge, and as soon as the blue clan entered, the red clan battalion was already waiting to engage. The two sides clashed fiercely. At that very moment, a series of strange explosions erupted around the academy. Munakata left the place to Seri to handle, while he alone leapt through the air. Just then, another explosion occurred. A red clan member was about to be crushed by falling rubble, and Munakata compassionately descended to shield him. But it turned out that man was a traitor who turned and stabbed Munakata. Munakata let go of all the rubble, indifferent to what would happen to himself and that man. Hearing louder explosions, Kusanagi thought perhaps someone had even brought out heavy artillery. Anna grew fearful that something terrible might happen. She foresaw that the entire place would soon explode completely, so she rushed to check. As she looked around, someone aimed and fired at her. Fortunately, Anna was not hit. Kusanagi tried to spot the sniper and discovered he was wearing a blue clan uniform. After the explosions, students fled in panic everywhere, buildings continuously blew apart, and Kukuri stood frozen watching everything collapse. Just as a brick was about to fall on her, Kuro appeared and rescued her. Yashiro ran up and reintroduced himself from the beginning. While they were happily regrouping, a voice rang out. Mikoto had already been waiting for the group there. News that Anna had been shot by a blue clan member had spread among everyone, pushing the conflict between the red clan and blue clan even higher. Seri was extremely worried about Munakata, but the battlefield left her no room for distraction. Yada rushed in to attack Seri relentlessly, but Fushimi suddenly appeared to block him. The two decided to settle their grudge once and for all. Mikoto could not understand why Yashiro, who had called him there, now intended to run away. The heat Mikoto radiated made it suffocating. But in truth, Yashiro was not the one who had called him. However, just saying so would not convince anyone, so Kuro stepped forward to fight and was easily knocked aside. Nico used illusions to distract Mikoto, but unexpectedly Mikoto stomped his foot and the illusion instantly vanished. The girl then slipped away, leaving the men to fight each other. Kuro kept striking to buy time, but no matter what he did, he could not push Mikoto back. Mikoto countered. Kuro dodged just in time and charged in for close combat. Mikoto disliked wasting time, so he transformed into a blazing red sun and nearly incinerated everything around him. No matter what Kuro did, it was as if he were swatting at a mosquito. Luckily, Munakata intervened just in time. Munakata, still carrying the young man who had stabbed him with the knife still lodged in his body, rushed in to block Mikoto, giving Yashiro's group a chance to escape to safety. Nico wanted to flee since they could not do anything to Mikoto, not even her illusions could work, but suddenly Kukuri saw Yashiro injured and wanted to check on him. When Yashiro approached, her demeanor completely changed, and she stabbed him with a shard of glass. It turned out Kukuri had been impersonated by the culprit. He was the one who had called Mikoto, shot Anna, and stabbed Munakata earlier. He would crawl into people's eyes and take control of one after another, and this time he took the chance to enter Yashiro's eyes. He wanted Yashiro to remember everything he had forgotten and kept rambling, urging him to fall asleep so he could easily control him. Yashiro heard Nico's voice calling, and seeing he could not take over, the fox-faced man returned to Kukuri's body and fled. Memories suddenly flooded back, shocking Yashiro. He lay down, gradually recalling everything, including the memories of the war back then and his story with the Gold King. Yashiro suddenly stood up. A surge of energy burst from him, forcing everyone to stop fighting and focus on him. A silver radiance spread across the entire area, illuminating everything. When the light faded, a sword appeared in the sky. Yashiro's sword had fully manifested, shining brightly across the heavens. The Gold King also saw and remarked that Yashiro really liked to surprise people. Kuro was terrified, not knowing what was happening. The wounds on Yashiro's body were gone. He reassured everyone not to worry, he himself was immortal. He was the Silver King, the first king, Adolf. Yashiro could be certain of one thing. He was now simply Yashiro who had been with everyone all along. The colossal sword in the sky vanished. Fushimi told Yada not to take his eyes off the battle. Both sides then returned to their furious clash. Mikoto and Munakata also did not want to miss the chance to fight each other seriously, so both drew their swords again to continue. Meanwhile, Yashiro had remembered everything. The previous colorless king had come to him and swapped bodies. He was interested in Yashiro's immortality and thus did it. After taking his body, he cast Yashiro off the airship. However, he only seized his body. His heart and soul he could not touch, because Yashiro was the Silver King. The Silver King represented indestructibility and was immune to all interference. In other words, it was the colorless king who had used that body to kill Tatsuka. Afterward, he swapped bodies with the Silver King and shifted the blame onto him. Perhaps it was the shock of the body swap that caused the Silver King to lose his memory. And besides Yashiro, he had stolen many other bodies too. The power of the colorless king this time could even affect other kings, and Kukuri's body earlier had been no exception. Yashiro's group set out together to rescue Kukuri. At that time, while the two sides were still fighting, Mikoto's and Monokata's swords appeared in the sky, their power overwhelmingly terrifying, especially Mikoto's crimson sword, which looked utterly abnormal. That forced Seri to abandon her position to go investigate. At that exact moment, Yashiro and Nico arrived overhead. Seri immediately grew wary and drew her sword to strike, but it had no effect. Yashiro gave Seri the ability to fly because he wanted her to join them. Yada and Fushimi were still fighting ferociously, but Kuro stepped into the middle of the battlefield to stop both sides under the command of the Silver King. Anyone who dared to rush in would be cut down, but Yada shouted that both sides only obeyed their own king. Kuro asked if they knew the reason why Mikoto had occupied the island, and why Monokata was not going all out to stop Mikoto, and why the two of them went off to settle things while leaving their clans here to fight such a meaningless battle. But Yada and Fushimi did not listen and rushed to attack Kuro. Knowing that words alone would not get through, he dared them all to come at him and take it if you can. Meanwhile, Yashiro together with Nico and Seri charged straight to the room where Kusanagi was watching over Anna. Anna reassured him that Yashiro's group was not the enemy, putting Kusanagi at ease. Just then, the phone rang, and Yashiro asked Kusanagi to answer. The caller was none other than the Gold King, who requested Kusanagi hand the phone to the foolish Yashiro. The two had been old friends back when they conducted research together, so Yashiro asked the Gold King for help with a few things. At that moment, Mikoto and Monokata had just finished warming up and decided to fight seriously from then on. The colorless king, still inhabiting Kukuri's body, sat watching from afar to see how the two would annihilate each other. Yashiro finished explaining what he needed from the Gold King, saying he was the only one who had ever truly understood him, and then requested the next step, for the two vice commanders, Kusanagi and Seri, to withdraw their men and help evacuate the students. Since the colorless king's target was the kings, they needed to evacuate as quickly as possible. Yashiro was sure the enemy's power was not limited to what they had seen. Suddenly, the colorless king used telepathy to threaten all the students that he would seize their bodies and powers, forcing Yashiro to respond. He asked Nico to do him one favor. He wanted her to be the first member of his clan. Nico had long considered herself Yashiro's, so she readily agreed. The two combined their powers to send a message to every student. When Yashiro appeared, all the students were furious, blaming him for their imprisonment here. But some felt a strange familiarity with him, though they did not know his name. He told them it did not matter if they knew who he was. What mattered was that he knew and cherished every one of them as precious friends, that he would protect them and show them the way out. With this, Yashiro quickly located the colorless king and sent a message to him, a challenge to meet face to face and settle this once and for all. Afterward, Nico collapsed from exhaustion, having spent too much energy. Yashiro entrusted her to Anna and the two vice commanders to care for, wishing them luck before leaving. The colorless king, though shaken by what had just happened, regained his composure, waiting for the two kings to finish each other off so he could swoop in and steal both their bodies and powers to become the strongest king. But his mind kept fracturing as Kukuri struggled desperately to regain her consciousness and call for help. Mikoto and Monokata continued their duel. Mikoto, though injured in the hand, mocked Monokata for being too weak and pathetic, while Monokata retorted that without his glasses he was not yet fighting at full strength. The two still hated each other as before and fought even harder. Meanwhile, Yada and Fushimi, those two on standby, still could not overwhelm Kuro, but the mark on Yada's body had begun to react as Mikoto neared his limit. The two had once been friends who joined Mikoto's clan together, but now they only bickered instead of fighting in unison. A comrade arrived to pull them both back since most of their side had already withdrawn. That comrade even saved the traitor Fushimi, and Mikoto himself had long ceased to care about his betrayal. That was exactly why Fushimi had left. Yashiro then came to find Kuro, telling him it was time to deal with the colorless king. Kuro wanted to know if the plan would succeed, and Yashiro admitted part of it depended on him. Kuro complained that even as a king, Yashiro was still as irresponsible as before. Then, kneeling down, he thought Ikaijin would approve of him serving another king. He spoke his oath to Yashiro, vowing to serve him until his last breath. Yashiro disliked such stiff formalities among friends and told him to stand. The seventh king at this moment saw that Monokata had weakened, but he wanted to wait until Mikoto grew even weaker before seizing him, and then he could snatch up Monokata as well. And once again Kukuri resisted and cried for help from within her possessed body. Yashiro and Kuro arrived in time and demanded that he release Kukuri's body. He pretended to be Kukuri and pulled out a gun to secretly shoot. but Yashiro had a shield, so he was unharmed. The 7th king threw out a bag of flash grenades and tried to flee, but was chased by Kuro, who struck him down to the ground. For the second time, Kuro drew his sword and declared that the 7th king was someone who could never be forgiven. No matter how much he begged for mercy, and then turned to curses, Kuro still swung his sword. The 7th king turned toward Yashiro and flew at him to possess him. He thought he had consumed him, but Yashiro was no longer the same as before. He realized the 7th king had possessed too many times, to the point his personality was in chaos, and he no longer remembered what he was. Yashiro absorbed and suppressed the soul of the 7th king. Afterwards, Kuro scolded him for acting recklessly with such a low chance of success. Yashiro asked Kuro to take Kukuri away, while he and Seri would handle the matter of the 2 kings, but Kuro would not allow it. Yet Yashiro was immortal, so he would be fine, and matters between kings must be settled by kings. Kuro left with Kukuri. Yashiro, however, was not at all fine, for he did not know how long he could control the 7th king. Yashiro did not want the 2 kings here to end up like him, and the Gold King of the past split onto separate paths. Meanwhile, the students had evacuated outside, not knowing where Kukuri was. Some believed she was with Yashiro, so she must be safe. Fushimi and Yada returned, and Yada was furious that their boss had been left behind. But since even Anna could do nothing, they could only pin their hopes on the kings, for this was the first time 4 kings had all appeared to battle. Yashiro stood between the 2 kings and was gradually being overtaken by the 7th king. He asked Mikoto to quickly finish off the 7th king, for that was what he had wanted to do from the start. Mikoto did not miss the chance and struck Yashiro straight through, unleashing a massive burst of energy. The power of a dying king exploded with tremendous force. Kuro had already gotten Kukuri away. She still remembered Kuro, but she did not remember Yashiro at all. Kuro felt it was best for her that way. Yashiro had disappeared. Mikoto's sword had completely deteriorated, reaching its limit and rotting away. He apologized for troubling Monokata so much. He had decided to give up and let his sword fall. Fearing it would cause the Kagatsu catastrophe, Monokata rushed forward and ended Mikoto's life before the massive sword struck the ground. Mikoto said his final words to Monokata and also wished to apologize to Anna, as he could no longer show her his beautiful colors. After the battle, only Monokata returned. The Blue King's clan was glad that Monokata had survived. Nico and Kuro only found Yashiro's umbrella at the scene. Nico hugged Yashiro's umbrella and cried. Kuro was also very sorrowful, but both still believed Yashiro lived because he was the immortal Silver King. They were very glad to have served Yashiro as his retainers. The marks on the bodies of Mikoto's clan members then one by one floated away, forming a beautiful red color for Anna to behold one last time. Fushimi knew that Mikoto had been a truly incredible king.